You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
All right, folks, welcome back to Right Up Meridian. Scott here with you. We have a new day. We have a team with Pascal Siakam. We have a team with Tyrese Haliburton at some point, and we have Tony back on with us. Tony, man, how you doing?
I am fantastic. Happy to be here. Happy to be a Pacers fan cheering on Pascal Siakam and a little bit of Tyrese Haliburton. We got a game of it together before another shutdown. So excited to be here.
Yeah, let's get to the shutdown secondly. Let's get to the Siakam trade first. You haven't been on since that happened. I've kind of given some of my thoughts, but what are your overall takes on the Siakam trade?
Man, I think we maybe even talked about it last time we were on, it wasn't a secret that the Pacers were targeting Siakam in trades for, quite some time.
Right.
And I think when we originally talked about it, man, I don't know about the timeline there and things like that. But that whole thought process for me was thinking we were probably going to have to give up some young assets in that trade. And then when it came out that, it was Nora and, you're giving up some late 2024 picks in a, not a great draft class. And then 2026 is so far down the line. Who knows what could happen by then. Plus, the Pacers have so many second rounders. You could probably flip some of those second rounders into a late first rounder if you really needed to, if you were really targeting somebody. So when I ended up seeing the package, like when the Woj, tweet came through or whatever the case it was like, man, I don't know how you could be mad at that as a Pacers fan in terms of what they gave up. Now, obviously folks have talked about okay, well, it's kind of a rental. I don't think that was the case. I think, he has the same agent as Andrew Nembhard. Obviously, the Pacers have worked closely with him before. I think there were some back channel things happening to where they got a pretty good guarantee that he was going to re-sign, especially when as soon as the trade happened, his agent let out a statement to Woj and some others of how excited he was for his future in Indiana. So I was thrilled with, kind of Pritchard being patient, not giving up any young assets that, could help this team moving forward. And I like it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, when you look at those first rounders, I said this before, I think, two of them could kind of be almost second rounders because one of them is in Oklahoma City. It's the worst of, I'm not even sure how it all works. It's the worst of all the Oklahoma City picks this year. So it's I've heard anywhere between 25 and 27. So it's basically a high second rounder or a late first rounder. So it's not like you're giving up a lottery pick there. And then 2026, you have to assume you're going to be better as the Pacers. So it's that theoretically is an end of 20s pick. So sometimes I think the headline of 3 first rounders is oh my God, it's that's 3, Joel Embiid. It's no, it could be just 3 late round picks of dudes who never end up playing. I think the other thing is, and it's been mentioned by some, but I feel not enough nationally that, as Pacers fans, we know this. Sometimes you have to overpay. We overpaid Bruce Brown, who we then traded, but we probably paid him an extra $5 million than what the market was bearing for. But it's because that's what you have to do if you're Indiana. Miami doesn't have to do that. New York, LA, they don't have to do that. Indiana kind of does. And same thing in the trade market. Sometimes you have to go out and get it. And the last thing I'll say is I heard Zach Lowe talking about this, and I think it's a great point that, the key is they went and got it, and they got it done. And this goes against some of the stuff I've been saying, just wait to free agency and go for it. But, if you think about it, if you wait to free agency, the guys that you may want to go and target, there are other suitors out there like Oklahoma City, like Houston, that have just this war chest of picks that they could just, over the top anything you throw out there. So there is kind of some benefit if you're the Pacers to be hey, we're going to kind of get this guy right now before, the free agent bidding war starts this offseason when we're basically not going to have the guns or the dry powder to go after it.
Certainly. And what's interesting to me, you mentioned Bruce Brown. Do you think the Pacers acquired him kind of knowing that he was going to be a flip piece?
That's a great question. I don't know.
It maybe even talk to him about that. Like, look, dude, we're going to overpay you. We're going to pay you $5 million more, but that's because we're probably going to end up having to salary match something at some point, and we might flip you. And so I wonder about that. Like that to me, because I mean, he was a perfect trade chip. Like he helped match the salary in that Siakam. He had a team friendly deal in terms of, it's a team option next season, like a tremendous trade asset. So it's like, look, dude, we're gonna get you paid more than you would get on the market elsewhere, but it's probably just a rental thing here where we end up flipping you, or at least that's the conversations I have to think they were probably having, in the war room when they were making that sign, like. Because they definitely overpaid, like you said. Like if you want free agents in Indiana, like you're gonna have to overpay. I think other teams were offering in the ballpark of like 15 million, so they gave him like 7 million more. They probably could have got him at like 18. But it's like, look, dude, we're gonna give you some money here, more than anybody else, and more than we probably should. But it's probably because you might not be a Pacer all season. I don't know that it happened.
No, it's
like
a great
speculation.
It's a great thought, and it makes sense. Like I mentioned before, I give my brother-in-law a lot of credit, Joe, for mentioning this to me. It's like he kind of was like, dude, Bruce Brown's kind of an expiring contract. And we started looking at like him and Buddy Hield together. It's like you put those together, that's a $40 million package. Like there's a max spot right there that you kind of have on an expiring deal. I understand Brown has a team option, but like if you don't pick the team option up, he's basically an expiring deal. So it's like the best of both worlds. No, I think you could be right. And, this would go to... the Pacers have done a lot of shrewd moves with their salary cap. Like, last year when they gave the extension to Turner and basically backloading all of his money to last year where they gave him like I don't know the exact, it was like a $12 to $13 million bump in one season where it's like, hey, we basically have dead cap space. We're going to throw it here so we don't have to throw it later. And it's kind of a nice win-win because it's like now you get Turner on a much better deal going forward, but you paid him his money so he's not pissed. So I think there's a lot of logic to that, and it would kind of go along with the Pacers making pretty good moves. And, again, we got to give this to the front office. I think you sent me the gif of like, or the shot of like, the Paul George trade tree. I continually go back to, the Pacers are one of the few organizations who are able to trade all-stars for all-stars. Everybody trades an all-star, for a bag of beans and a bunch of picks. It's like Paul George turned into Oladipo and Sabonis, who were both all-stars. Oladipo turned into some other pieces, but they turned Sabonis into Haliburton. And then some of those pieces, if you kind of go deep enough in the genealogy, turns into the pieces that you're able to kind of put together to get Siakam. But it's like so I give the Pacers a lot of credit. I think you could be onto something with them signing Brown with the idea of moving him.
Yeah, because it's funny. I've even seen Raptors fans now like, all right, what are we flipping Brown for? Like,
right.
He might not even be a Raptor for a month because it's a great trade chip.
Yeah.
Like with that team option, it'll be interesting to see, assuming he doesn't get that team option picked up, what the market actually says about his value next season. Because I mean, he's putting up pretty much the same numbers he put up last year. Better in some spots, worse in some spots, but throughout, like his numbers, it's pretty spot on with where he's been. So it's like, what will his true value be? Or does somebody else, just do the same thing and he just kind of becomes a journeyman that's making a little bit more money than he probably should. But there's a price tag for that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get off Brown in a sec. This is where I do think, fans of the league, and I think the league, it's going to be a hard reality when, the salary cap for next year, as looked it up, it's $142 million. A max spot is somewhere in the $40 to $50 million range. That's kind of what Haliburton will be getting. That's probably where the Siakam pieces like, Tatum and Brown are in that spot. If you don't want to be near the apron or over the cap, which has some pretty rough penalties, we can do in a different pod, but it's like, this is where guys like Bruce Brown, I think, are really going to be hurt by this new setup, is that, if you're paying $80 million to two dudes, which most teams are going to want to be in that position, you want to have two max guys, you're paying $80 to $100 million for two guys. You need to find 13 people for basically $40 million. And if you're paying one of them 20, it's like, all right, now you need 12 guys at 20 million. Like the days of guys making 20, I think, are just going to be done. I think it's going to be two guys making 50 and then a bunch of guys making like 5 or 6. it's just going to be a tough reality for a guy like Bruce Brown, who it's nothing against his ability. Like, it's just you're either making 50 or you're not. And unfortunately, he's not a max guy. And I think a lot of these guys in that kind of that mid range who normally would be making 15 to 17, it's going to be a tough reality over the next couple of years when they suddenly realize like they're probably going to be making 5. But anyway, that's probably a different discussion. But
yeah, it's so intriguing though, because I think, like you said, like with this new CBA, there's some, like you said, some pretty severe penalties if you start getting into that second apron, and living in that. So, to me, I love it as a small market franchise. Like, it kind of helps spread the wealth, if you will, in terms of top talent. But, it's going to be interesting to see how teams navigate this. And that's where having like Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan and those guys, like, I feel very confident that the Pacers understand this like to a T and how to operate within the, the constraints and things. And, I'm thrilled with what our front office has kind of built in these last, really since the Haliburton trade, kind of retooled this roster and been, competitive. And now it's like, all right, we've got a window here with Haliburton. Like, what are we going to do? And they've set themselves up nicely to operate within that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like next year's salary structure, next year the Pacers are already at 105. If you assume they sign Siakam to, let's just say, I don't know, $40 million a year, I'm just throwing a number out, that puts them at the cap. Like, it's wild. Like, they're already at the cap. But you look at the rest of the contracts they have, and it's like outside, like Neesmith is a pretty good contract at $11 million a year. The only one that kind of outlies is, Turner at 19. That's one of those where it's like he's probably more an 11 million guy under the new structure. Topping at 6 isn't bad. You got to keep him, like, this is where it gets tough. It's like you got to keep him, in that range. So anyway,
and he's Toppin, is that a team option, or he's got a qualifying offer up or something like that?
As I'm looking at it, he's got a 1-year deal. Like, he's a free agent at the end of the year.
Gotcha. Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was looking at Spotrac. I forgot the Pacers are still paying Nick Stauskas and Juwan Morgan.
Yeah, Juwan Morgan's still getting $1 million over like 1.21 over the next. Good for him, man. It's why like Daniel Tice is still getting $6 million this year. It's how that stuff works is bananas. But no, I think it's a good trade. The rumors that you heard is that Sacramento had interest, but Siakam definitely didn't want to go to Sacramento. Or the word was he was kind of not going to re-sign there. And I read between the tea leaves. Siakam is a free agent. He doesn't have a signed contract, but for immediately those reports to come out, from Woj that he's really interested in what the Pacers are doing and really likes it, that tells me that even if there's not a deal already in place, kind of a wink deal, that it's very likely that Siakam is going to re-sign. And because they got him now, my understanding is, you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure they do have the ability to offer him a little bit more, better offers. So, he would have to
they've
take
got his
less.
bird right, so they'd have to give a little bit more money.
Take less to go out. So, no, I think it's great. And, the timeline thing was what we were kind of concerned about, or I was concerned about, finding someone in the age range. But, Siakam is just 29, so it's not like it's a huge gap. And also it's like, I said this before, it's like, Haliburton's so young, finding other young guys is just like, it's probably not possible. It's like Scotty Barnes would be awesome. Like, the Raptors are not going to give up on Scotty Barnes. So it's like getting those, it's like, you're not going to get everything you want, especially if you're a team like the Pacers. You're going to have to give and take somewhere. And the playing style of Siakam seems to fit perfectly with Haliburton. So, all in all, I think it was a really good trade. And I do also like, for the first time in a while, it feels like the Pacers are like, hey, we're ready to push our chips in at least somewhat and make a move and really go for it, as opposed to kind of sitting back and just seeing if we can hit a bunch of second-round picks.
Yeah, what really intrigues me, too, is, kind of what we saw as the play-in tournament went on. Haliburton's going to get doubled. When he's creating for everybody, and the Pacers didn't really have another person that could create their own shot or create shots for others. Now they absolutely have that. So it's kind of pick your poison. Like, you want to double Haliburton, then okay, you're going to have 4-on-3 situations where Siakam's kind of leading that charge. That's a little bit more scary than, if it's a Neesmith or whatever the case may be. And those guys are fine. Don't get me wrong. They're just not all NBA type players that are going to make the right decision 9 times out of 10. So that's what's intriguing to me. You mentioned the Sacramento thing. I thought that was funny because it kind of came, I think Shams came out and was like, Sacramento is like very interested in Siakam, and they're talking about a deal. And then like 30 minutes later, Siakam's camp must have gone out and been like, he's not resigning there. And then it was like the Kings are out of the Siakam sweepstakes. It was like 30 minutes later. So I think he was very narrowed in on like he wanted to be a Pacer. He wanted to play with Haliburton, which just goes back to like how awesome it is to have a Haliburton where guys want to play. And then Woj, after Siakam got traded to the Pacers, said as much like dudes want to play with Haliburton, young, energetic, and he's going to feed you the ball. Like he doesn't have to shoot all the shots. Like he's going to get his 20, but he doesn't have to shoot all the shots, and he's going to get you the ball in places you want to get it. And it's a win-win for everybody, which is super exciting.
I also think, I personally think this is going to help Ben Mathurin a lot, because I think up to this point, you see Mathurin's growth. I think he's shown a lot of progress the last like 15, 20 games. But I do think he struggles sometimes when he's in the second unit, he's the number one option, or when he's kind of looked at as a number two option. And this is, I think this is going to be good for his growth, because it's like, all right, again, he's only 21. Now it's like, all right, man, you are the third option, no question. Not in a bad way, but it's like now you get, when you're playing the Celtics, you're not getting, Holiday or Jaylen Brown on you. Like you are getting, Holiday or White, you're getting maybe Jaylen Brown. Like you're getting the third option. The Celtics are a bad example because all those dudes are great defenders, but like,
I get what you mean.
Yeah. Like you're getting the third play. And it's like, this might give him a little more runway to kind of grow as a player when all the lights and attention are not on him. So I look at it as like, this could be a great spot for Mathurin to grow into that role.
I totally agree. Like you said, he's kind of the third fiddle. I mean, just everybody, like that's what's so great about it. Like Miles Turner's going to benefit from this. Like, everybody, like when Sabonis and Turner were there, it was always like, how will they ever play together? And they never really did. Like, well, now you've got Siakam. That's somebody that's going to take the defensive away. He's going to be able to hit Turner. And from everything I've gathered, like I'm not as deep into like the X's and O's and stuff as I am in college basketball, but folks like Caitlin Cooper who study this type of stuff, talked about how like the Raptors really didn't have an offense that was conducive to Siakam's skill set as much, and especially when he was like the only creator. So like that's what I'm excited about, is like, you've got the historically best offense in NBA history right now that you're plugging him into, and it's going to take some time for him to figure everything out, but that's exciting.
Yep. No, I totally agree. I think it's all good. Here's the question is when do we get to, last thing I would say is, the other kind of nice little piece you got at the end of this road trip is, in the Suns game, you had Jarris Walker just come in, damn near get a double-double, getting a ton of rebounds, which to me is like, that's the most important thing. Cause like, that's the shooting will come, the scoring is kind of, he had a good shooting night, but like they'll lock down on that. But, if you're able to come in and get rebounds, like I remember reading somewhere that's something a lot of scouts look at in college. Like if you can get rebounds, that's something that translates to the next level. Scoring doesn't always translate. Scoring can be shut down with double teams. Rebounds is something that's just effort. If you're able to do it, you can do it. You see Walker getting rebounds. Like that was a really nice thing where it's like the Pacers were like, it sounds like there was a world out there where they could have possibly thrown in Mathurin and Walker and gotten, OG Anunoby as well. And they didn't. And I think that was, at the time I thought it was the right move, but it's nice seeing Walker kind of come out. It's like, oh, like, hey, if we can get a guy who can come out and give a couple points and go and grab like 7 or 8 rebounds, like that's a huge addition to this team as well.
And playing him at the 3, which is really interesting. And Carlisle said as much, like, look, like if I got to go big and go Jarris Walker at the 3 and Siakam at the 4, that's kind of where the NBA is going, like, length and height. And it's something the Pacers have lacked for several years now, kind of those big bodies on the wing. And then all the, within the last week, all of a sudden you discover you could play those 2 at the 3 and the 4. That really helps your defense. Like you said, you're rebounding, those types of things. And then you've got Miles at the 5 who can play more on the perimeter offensively, and then defensively can protect the rim. So that lineup is intriguing. Jarris Walker has been a lot of fun to watch. I've watched his Mad Ants games, and he just absolutely dominates. I mean, he looks like he doesn't even belong out on the G League floor sometimes when he plays in those games. And you see why, when he can come in, contribute the way he's contributed in the NBA games. And also Ben Shepherd's been in the rotation now for the last 5 or 6 games, and he's putting up some nice numbers as well. So it's been good to see the first round picks, kind of out of necessity, getting some playing time, but they're taking advantage of it. And it just kind of like, they got so many pieces. It's like, where do you even find the minutes for these guys? With the same thing with McConnell. McConnell's gotten some DMPs this year. I think he's like the third highest paid player on the Pacers. Every time he comes in, he brings energy, but it's like sometimes it's just hard to find minutes for all these dudes when everybody's healthy.
Yep. So here's the question I have for you is, we're excited to see how it's going to work. We're like, when we see it with Haliburton, Haliburton was supposed to be reevaluated 2 weeks after 2 weeks, which would have been, yesterday. We're taping this on Tuesday, the 23rd. It's supposed to be on Monday. I think we all thought he was, kind of surprised to see him go on the West Coast trip. Although I read through Scott Agnes, it's like, it makes sense. He wasn't that injured. It allowed the training staff to stay with the team. I think he wanted to be there. I think going through Sacramento was something he probably wanted to do. I was really surprised to see him in that Portland game come out and play. It sounds like he really wanted to play with Siakam's first game. I think he really wanted to play in Sacramento, the homecoming. And now you read that, we're coming back for a homestand. He's going to be reevaluated after 3 more games. He's sitting again. I'm curious, why do you think he played against Portland? Like, was that a player decision overruling the team? Like, it just seems odd that he plays one and then he continues to sit. Like, as a fan, I look at it as like, I just want you to get healthy. This is an injury that can linger. Like, just get healthy, and then would love to have you out. I don't really like the idea of you playing one game against Portland, which we lost, by the way, and then maybe having this injury linger longer than it needs to.
It's interesting. I want to take Carlisle for his word, and he kind of said today, like, no setbacks, nothing. Like, it's the plan. I'm like, I've never seen this plan in action before for a hammy injury. Like, bring him back and then sit him for a few, another week. Like you said, hammies aren't anything to play with. I'm not gonna sit here and question like the medical staff or anything like that. It is a weird situation though. Like, you don't see it happen very often like this unless there is some sort of setback or rushed back or whatever the case may be. It's kind of funny. Like, in the Portland game, he kind of looked a little bit slower. Like, he might have been kind of favoring the hammy a little bit. He still put up like 20 and 16 or something crazy like that. Yeah, it's a weird situation. Like I said, doesn't seem like a very common way to come back from the injury, and the fact that they said we're going to evaluate him after 2 weeks, then he played. Little odd, but like you said, just get healthy. Like, that's all we want and need is to get healthy. And I don't know if the Siakam trade just kind of made that timeline increase because he wanted to play with them and be together, or I don't know, just kind of a weird deal.
So there are 82 games in the season. Doing my math here. 82 games in the season. You have to play a minimum of 65 games to earn all MVP, all NBA. I don't think Haliburton's going to win MVP, although it'd be awesome. He's got some skills to do it. But anyway, to get all NBA, you've got to play 65 games. So he's missed, as of now, 9 games. So he's got about, 82 minus 65? So he's got 17. So he's got 6 more games. What is it? 8 more games.
Once you include the 3 that he's definitely missing.
Yeah, so 8, 7, 6, 5. So he's got 5 more games after that he could miss. And I think that's something. I wonder where that plays in. I wonder if that Portland game, that was kind of a port in the storm of a West Coast trip, where it's like, that's the worst team you're going to play. You're going up against a rookie guard in not Scotty Barnes, Scoot Henderson.
Simons. Or Henderson, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whoever's guard, but you're going against a garbage team. I wonder if the idea there is let's just get a game in, get him some playing time. The injury isn't that bad. It's just a lot of it's weird, because then it's like, why wouldn't you play a little bit here and there at home? I don't know, but I do think that has to be in the back of everyone's mind, because first off, if he continues to play the way he was playing before he was injured, he will be an all NBA player. He's got a pretty good shot at being first or second team all NBA, somewhere in that range. I mean, if he's leading the league in assists. And again, I don't know all the details, but I do know that based on his max deal, being all NBA really affects his deal and allows him. I mean, we're talking $15-20 million extra. Which, if you're Haliburton, you want to get if it's a difference between 2 games and not 2 games. So I just want to keep that in everyone's mind, that that's something that's real. And I do think the team, Haliburton, like I think they're looking at that as well. And I wonder if that's why that game in Portland happened the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's as good of a theory as I've got. It just is a weird thing. If they say there's no setback, like that's great. I love to hear it. Maybe it's one of those things where you see what it does after kind of playing on it hard and see if it flares up or you get some more inflammation or whatever the case may be. Like I don't know enough about hamstring recovery to make like an educated you know statement on it or anything like that. But yeah, I just, like I said, I kind of come back to it's just a weird timeline. But more than anything, if there's no setback and he's still recovering and getting healthy, back to full health, that's great for his sake. I really just wanted him to be able to be back by the All-Star break so that he's able to participate in all that in the home city. Sounds like he's still on that timeline. Obviously, would love to have him back just for the sake of winning games. He obviously helps the team in that. And January is just an absolute gauntlet. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, hopefully after these 3 games, he's back and, at least get those 65 games in where he's eligible for all NBA. And that's for his own sake there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope he can get all NBA. That would be a real bummer if he doesn't get it based on like 3 games. That would just suck. I do think what this does mean, I mean, I'm looking at some of Siakam's game splits. I mean, it's wild. So we'll just go, starting in 2018, 2019, he started 79 of 80 games and then 60 of 60, and then 56 of 56, and then 68 of 68, 71. I mean, he hasn't missed a game in like years. Like he is
right.
Unbelievably durable. What that also, I see him playing a lot. And I think, if you're looking at a Haliburton who can only miss after these 3, like 4 or 5 more games, he's going to play a lot, which is good. And it's just, as a fan, nothing is, the Celtics are doing it smart, where it's just like, you're not seeing that. You and I went to the Celtics game. It's like Jason Tatum's not playing. Like they're kind of randomly sitting one guy every single night. I think what's nice about this team, I think it's also good. They're young. They could do it. Like, I think you're going to see once Haliburton's back, it's just, you're not going to have nights where it's like, we're sitting Haliburton. Like you're going to have to play him all nights and Siakam. And I think it's important because the last thing I will say is, things are good, but we are kind of hitting that precipice of, starting to lose contact of some of those teams in the playoff hunt. So, right now the Pacers are tied for 7th with the Heat, 9.5 games back of the Celtics, but, they are 3 games back of the Cavs, which is the 4 spot. So starting to lose a little bit of ground there. They're a game and a half above the Magic. They are, 4.5 above the Bulls and about 6.5 above the Hawks. They're not going to fall out of the play-in because they're like 7 games above the Nets or 6.5 games above the Nets. But there is, if they struggle in this homestand, like, it's going to take a couple games for Siakam and Haliburton to kind of get things right. And there's really no practice time between now and then. I just worry that they're going to get to a point where they've lost touch with the 4, 5, and 6 seeds, and they're going to kind of lock themselves into a play-in spot by middle of February.
Yeah, that's. I mean, obviously, worst case is missing the play-in in general, but if you can get out of that play-in, that's where you want to be, and ideally, if you can square up with the Bucks in the first round, is really where you want to be.
Yeah,
in my opinion. If you're the Pacers. The Heat also, they just made a trade today. Traded Kyle Lowry basically for Terry Rozier. And so they're kind of going for it as well.
I'm just laughing. That was something like Simmons was talking about on one of his podcasts. He's like, Rozier is like going to be a perfect Heat. Like everybody just plugs into that Heat culture. Like they have built such a system down there. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, between Pat Riley and Spoelstra, like it's as dynamic of a duo as you can possibly have.
Yeah, all their draft picks seem to be like just hit. It's kind of annoying, but anyway.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like Jaime Jaquez. You just plug him in. He'll just go to work.
Yep. So, I don't know. I mean, what do you – I don't think it's lost, but I am getting concerned that, you're only 2.5 back of the Knicks, but I foresee, maybe like a 1-4 homestand or 1-3 homestand coming up. Like it's a tough. You have the Nuggets, you have the Sixers, you have the Suns, all tough games. Then you have the Grizzlies on Sunday. So you got to win one of those, assuming the Grizzlies game. It'd be nice to get two, but I don't think you're going to have Haliburton for any of these. This is where, it's asking a lot of Siakam, but it's like if you can try and get, 2-2 here, it's just at some point they're going to have to start kind of going 500 in these little splits, because I do wonder if they get, 3, 4, 5, 6 games behind the 5 and 6 seeds, if they're just going to be out of reach of getting one of those locked in playoff spots.
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid concern, for sure. I mean, I do think if you can get everybody healthy, things in February do lighten up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then into March as well. So, like, you've got this stretch here, like I said, just January is just brutal for it has been, and it will continue to be throughout the rest of the month. But if you could somehow, like, through, that Sacramento game, the 2nd of February, like, if you could somehow just go like 500 in that stretch, and like you said, keep those teams at least at arm's distance where you can make a run late February, March, and get yourself into that picture, like that's an ideal scenario. But like you said, it's tough. That's like the thing people don't really realize about midseason trades is like the NBA is not practicing on off days and stuff like that. Like they're traveling, and very rarely are you gonna like have an intense practice where you're going through things. So like, they're pros. So Siakam, like, he's having to understand the terminology and things the Pacers are doing, but like it's kind of all happening on the fly, and that's hard to like plug into a system and just immediately be like that. And then you compound that with, your other best player isn't playing.
Right.
It's going to take some time, like you said. Like, I think it sets up well for like an end of season run and kind of gelling at the right time at the playoff time. You would hope at least. But it makes for a sucky January.
No, and somebody talked about one of our last pods that, after that loss to the Magic, they had a practice, and then it's like they won 6 in a row after that. Like they were kind of floundering, and like even Carlisle said, like we just haven't had time to practice. And it's like it's weird to think how important even at this level for pros like practice is, but it is important. And that's something when you look at the schedule, there's no off days, and like there's just no time. And unfortunately, with the All-Star game being here, it's kind of nice, but it's like Haliburton's going to be kind of the mayor of Indianapolis. Like you can't even sneak a practice in probably during the All-Star break because it's all going to be happening here, and Haliburton's going to be involved. Like they probably will do something, but I think if you could sneak a practice in, because you are right. When you look at the February schedule after the Kings, I'll just rattle it off. You're at the Hornets, home to the Rockets and Warriors, at the Knicks, at the Hornets, at the Raptors, home to the Pistons, Mavs, Raptors, Pelicans, at Spurs, at Mavs, and then it gets a little bit tougher. But that's a pretty good stretch there. Like that's a stretch where you can make a lot of hay. And then I'm not, I haven't dug in enough. I'm not sure what the Knicks and what the Heat, what their schedules look like. But it does feel like, that's the positive way of looking at it, is that we haven't totally lost touch of those 4, 5, and 6 seeds, and we've gone through a pretty brutal stretch of our schedule while missing a player, while just completing a trade. So I'm with you. It's like if we can just try and keep within 3 to 4 games, shooting distance of the 6 seed, I do think in February you could see us go on like, a 9-3 run or something.
Yeah, and to me that's like that's like the goal here. Sustain here with the injuries and whatnot, and Haliburton being out, and then make your run kind of heading into April in the playoff time. And I know I'll be super excited if they go on a little run here like February, March, and start, possibly like a home court first round matchup. I think the city would be buzzing. Selfishly, my company, we're moving downtown starting March 1st, right by Gamebridge. So like I'm super excited about that. Like I can go to work, I can just hop over to Gamebridge. Like I have grand visions for what my April looks like. So
do it for Tony. Do it for Tony. No, it's tough. It's like we're all excited to see the Haliburton Siakam pairing, and it's like we're just having to wait longer and longer. But I do think this is where we get some delayed gratification. Well, all right, with that, Tony, we'll get you out of here. Thanks for joining. Thank everybody for listening, and we will be back probably next week after this homestand, and hopefully we'll be talking about the return of Tyrese Haliburton, and hopefully we have some good Siakam stories as he gets his home debut. If you're going to the games this week, have a great time, and thank you all for listening. Tell a friend, and until next time, this is Scott for Right Up Meridian, signing off.